Well, hello there, Space Monkeys. Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. This episode, we're going to do a little bit of laughing and a little bit of crying. We're going to do kind of a lightning round of news, since it's been a while since I've done the news on this channel here. I'd like to first start out by shouting out Comrade Misty and pointing out that there's a huge event, the Hands Off Assange event in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Justice coming up in early October. That's going to be October 8th. From 12 to 2 p.m. I will leave the address down below. I believe it's on Pennsylvania. And if you can go, please go. I will not be there, but Comrade Misty will be there, and huge shout out to her. Nobody has been a bigger warrior for Assange than her, and I love her to death. So shout out to her, and please, if you can help her out and show up, please do that. It's probably the, if not the most important fight of our lives as millennials, to fight for Assange and press freedom. If it's not the most, it's one of the top 2 or 3 most important things that we can fight for. And if you guys remember correctly, that's one of those things that the president, whether it's Biden or Trump or some other cretin, they can pardon Assange and Snowden and Daniel Hale and all of that stuff, drop the charges against Assange because he committed no crime other than just doing good journalism. Now, that's why it's an important fight for us, and that's why it's also an easy solution that we must always be fighting for, because it doesn't matter who's in Congress. It doesn't matter who has control of Congress. Any president can drop the charges against those whistleblowers. So huge shout out to Comrade Misty. We need to continue that fight, and no one fights harder than she does. Now, let's talk about the news. Some of this stuff, it's going to sound like jokes, but it's really not. I wish they were jokes, and I might make some jokes along the way, but it's becoming more and more like a cartoon in this country, more like a waking nightmare that operates somewhat cartoonishly. So first and foremost, Brian Stelter is done at CNN. He quit at his show Reliable Sources, which basically means that it's going to become a more reliable source now that he's not in there. Maybe not. Depends on who they choose to follow up with him. It might be Nina Jankowicz. We'll just have to see what kind of clown takes that guy's job. But I'm not, of course, celebrating anybody losing their job, but of course he's a rich-ass motherfucker who does defense for rich-ass motherfuckers in media, so I don't feel too bad for him, and I think he'll be just fine. He might find a job over at, I don't know, one of the other propaganda outlets will pick him up. Maybe, I don't know, is TYT looking for somebody like him? Maybe he can be Nina Turner's new co-host. So that is, I guess, funny. It couldn't happen to somebody who lies more than Brian Stelter. I mean, if it's going to happen to somebody, it might as well happen to one of those people who does nothing but lie with every breath they take. So number 2, the Inflation Reduction Act passed. It went through the Senate. Manchin got what he wanted. It's Manchin's bill. And basically, it does nothing for inflation as far as I've seen, because it doesn't do any meaningful taxation on the ultra-wealthy. So I don't see how it's going to actually rein in inflation. Probably won't do any of that. And there's some awful poison pills put in there for big oil, because Manchin wrote it, and he's a coal baron, and he, big oil invests heavily in people like Sinema and Manchin, so of course. So it gives away 60 million acres of offshore drilling land and 2 million acres of public land, within our landmass per year for a decade to big oil. So that's going to hurt the climate fight for a lot. I mean, it's supposed to, they call it a climate bill. I can't imagine why. It's only going to hurt the climate. I was reading something earlier today that, like, the amount of acreage that they're putting in this bill, that they're giving away to big oil and, ExxonMobil, all these big companies, is larger than the entire, continental shelf on the inside of the Gulf of Mexico. So, and by a large margin. So I don't see how that's going to help at all. It does allow for wind and solar to be invested in, but only after those millions, tens of millions of acres are given away every year. So it's contingent that we continue to destroy the planet in a massive way in order to get crumbs in terms of renewable energy. So that's one thing it does. The other thing that it does, that it allows Medicare to negotiate on 10 drugs as of the year 2026. So it's going to bring the prices of certain drugs down. And of course, the big pharma companies have already decided they allowed for these certain drugs to be negotiated upon. None of the expensive new age drugs are included, of course, because that would hurt their bottom line too much. So this is, and it's only for Medicare eligible people, so it's only for old people. So that's by far the least you can do in terms of helping Medicare negotiate drug prices, and it's not going to do a goddamn thing for most people. So this is supposed to apparently help us in a lot of ways and curb inflation and help the American people, and they're touting it as some of the biggest climate investments in the history of mankind. It's like, well, yeah, not really. Like you're talking about the tallest kid in kindergarten. There have been very little climate investments in this country historically. So saying that we're now investing a little bit in wind and solar and it's contingent on how much we drill is really not going to help anything. So it's a horrible bill. Manchin wrote it, so that tells you exactly. All the people touting it right now, the boutique left, they're not doing it as much as just a neoliberal class. They were just pretending like Joe Manchin is the devil and he's standing in the way of everything, and then they let him write his own bill, and it passes almost like unanimously through Congress. Of course it does. And it's not going to help inflation, and it's going to hurt the climate like crazy. So that's what you get when Democrats have a majority. Next is George W. Bush is now teaching a masterclass on leadership. Again, not a joke. Not a joke. What's next? What's next? If it's going to get more cartoonish, is it going to be Hunter Biden teaching an art class? I mean, it could be like Andrew Cuomo teaching leadership. What are we talking about here? It's just... Nancy Pelosi teaches how to trade stocks. This is ridiculous. He's a war criminal. And the only thing he led us into were multiple wars that cost trillions of dollars and millions of Iraqi lives and hundreds of thousands of lives in Afghanistan. So, again, I wish I could write that funny. I'd be famous. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I forgot to also add... In the IRA, there is a bolstering of the IRS. 87,000 new armed IRS agents are now going to be added to the government payroll, so that if you do any shenanigans on your taxes, an armed guard is going to show up and tell you that you have to do your taxes correctly. Otherwise, you're going to, be in some trouble. And they say that that's only for rich people. If you're hiring 87,000 new IRS, you're not just going after rich people. And in fact, I would bet that they're not going to go after rich people barely at all. I think that's all for middle class and working class people. So vote blue no matter who, right? Let's see here. Fauci is stepping back from his job at the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, which they say he's retiring, but he's really not retiring. He's just stepping down from his current position. And if I had to guess, it has something to do with... the Democrats know that likely the House is going to be lost. Not the Senate, but likely the House is going to be lost to Republicans, and there's going to be some sort of congressional investigation into Fauci. He may take a job at a big pharma company. Wouldn't that be funny? He takes a job at Pfizer right afterwards. That would be appropriate. That's probably what will end up happening. Not exactly that, but something like that. And he'll, in the meantime, have to assemble a team of lawyers to avoid being, dismantled by Congress. Now, of course, the Democrats want to protect Fauci because he did everything that they wanted him to do during Biden's last 2 years with COVID. But the Republicans definitely want to look into him. So I imagine that's why he's stepping back from his current position. I think he wants to be out of the public eye for a while because absence makes the heart grow fonder, and it makes it more likely that he is going to be able to defend himself adequately. So I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I would guess. So we'll just have to see. I'm glad to see him step back. He did a terrible job. Really, really terrible. Lied to Congress multiple times. Him telling people that they shouldn't be wearing masks when it first hit, or not, taking a bunch of masks when this first hit, so that he could save a bunch for the medical personnel in this country, so that they didn't have a shortage. What he should have been saying at that point was, no, we need to help. We need to convince Congress, and I myself can convince Congress to use the Defense Production Act to produce high-quality masks that get given to everybody and just mailed to everybody's doorstep. If he were really, really responsible and cared about everybody having masks and there not being a shortage, the answer is not to tell people not to buy masks. The answer is to produce high quality masks that you give away to everyone for free so that they don't go out and hoard them. And among other things that he's done that I don't agree with, and of course, I have a medical background, so I disagreed with that at the time. I disagree with it now. I think he's done some shady ass things, so I think that's why he's backing off. But good riddance. I can't imagine anybody good who's way better than him is going to take his job, though. It's like whack-a-mole. You whack him down, and then another one that's just as bad and who's a little bit younger and who doesn't have the ire of half the country focused on him will pop up and take his spot. Lastly, I kind of touched on it, the Democrats look likely to either maintain or even grow their seats in the Senate, but they're definitely going to lose the House. It looks like they're going to lose the House, 90% chance. And they might still lose the Senate, but there's been some races where like some of the senators the Republicans put forward are just so cartoonish that they can't possibly win. For instance, we're going to talk just briefly about Dr. Oz. Looks like he's going to get killed by John Fetterman. That's not necessarily because John Fetterman is a really good candidate, even though I think he does portray himself in kind of an everyman type way, which I think is to his advantage. But Dr. Oz has run like one of the most pathetic and hilarious and memed out campaigns in the history of in this country. It really is kind of funny. Who'd have known? Dr. Oz is an elitist who knows nothing about politics, and every time he gets in front of a camera, he does what like Hillary Clinton does, or what Kamala Harris does, or any of these other billionaires like Mike Bloomberg do. You put them in front of a camera, no matter who you have them talking to, if they're talking to a poor person or if they're doing poor people things like buying groceries, they're going to out themselves as being elitists who don't actually buy their own groceries and who don't talk to poor people at all. And that's what Dr. Oz has done. It's been a hilarious downward spiral, and he gets ratioed Kirsten Cinema style on every single tweet. He gets ratioed. And Fetterman is good at trolling him too, which actually helps him build his campaign. So I think he'll probably take down Dr. Oz, and I think that the Democrats will likely keep the Senate. But it won't matter, because if they don't keep a majority, you're not going to get anything done. If you think they've gotten nothing done with a majority, just wait till the Republicans take over the House. If they get anything done over the last 2 years of Biden's presidency, it's going to be a neo-fascist, extreme right-wing nightmare that'll go through the House. And then when it gets to the Senate, even though they might still have the Senate, they'll just get Manchin and Sinema and Warner or Angus King or any of these other Manchin-like faux Democrats to vote for the Republican legislation. It'll get through the Senate anyway. And then, of course, Joe Biden, he'll sign whatever gets to his desk because he's told to. And he's basically a living puppet at this point. Literally. So we're going to talk about a couple other things here. These are just observations. Apparently, Hillary Clinton is still calling Bernie Sanders a sexist. A new book came out about that. So, it's just another Tuesday. Let's see here. The police are beating the shit out of people at an alarmingly high rate, which is, again, just another Tuesday. The viral video I saw yesterday was of the Arkansas police pinning a guy to the ground, and 3 big old, mooses beat the living shit out of a guy, like punching his head against the ground and kneeing him and kicking the shit out of him. And it's ruthless. It's all over right now. And that's, again, that happens every day. But that video happened to gain a lot of traction. The Arkansas Police Department's I don't remember what township it was or if it was state police or whatever, but it was an absolutely ruthless video. And that's, again, that's just America nowadays. Cenk can't stop talking about Jimmy Dore. Nancy Pelosi is working on making a lot of money off of starting a war with Taiwan, or certainly escalating with Taiwan, which is, again, that's Nancy Pelosi for you. She'll teach a masterclass on that after she retires. And the neoliberals and the boutique lefties are talking again about how the walls are closing in on Trump after Mar-a-Lago got raided by the FBI. But nobody's listening because this is like that old story, the boy who cried Russia. At this point, nobody's listening. We've heard this mantra of the walls closing in on Trump before, and at this point, I don't think anybody gives a fuck. And I think it's actually going to help Trump in the long term because it reinforces his claim that the deep state is all against him, that he's actually an outsider, and that they're going to do anything to take him down, and it's all a witch hunt. If there's not something substantial in the documents that they seized from his house, that's just going to reinforce his narrative, which gives him power to win in 2024, which that's what the Democrats do best. They pump life into Trump by attacking him instead of, they should have just shut the fuck up about him since he lost in 2020. But people like TYT and the whole mainstream media can't shut the hell up about him, so therefore they breathed life into him when he should have just like walked away a loser into the woods. But they can't shut up about him, and he's as powerful as ever. And if he runs, even if he's not allowed to run, he might run from being in behind bars and still win. I mean, it's, again, stranger than fiction, but the Democrats do everything they can to do nothing for the people and shoot themselves in the foot and set up Republicans to dunk on them. So, and again, Dr. Oz is going to get crushed by John Fetterman. Who'da thunk? I think that John Fetterman has an appeal to the people, even though he's not really a great candidate. I think that the progressives have a new play in their playbook, like the Justice Dem types. I believe they understand now that they have to set themselves apart when it comes to rhetoric, but not substance. Fetterman is very much like a middle-of-the-road kind of faux progressive, but he dresses like a normal person. He speaks like a normal person with normal cadence, which I think people will gravitate to. And he portrays himself as sort of an outsider, but he's like, you know, wants to be buddy-buddy with Israel and stuff like that. And he's still going to beat Dr. Oz, more than likely, but not because he's really good on substance, but because the progressives, I think, understand now they have to set themselves apart from the Neolibs in some way. He just dresses differently, talks differently, kind of like Trump. You know, he talks in an everyman type cadence, and then he trolls the living shit out of his opponent, which most people like. They liked it when Trump did it. I think they also like it when Fetterman does it. And I think that the progressives will probably replicate what they've done with John Fetterman in the future, which is basically run, you know, milquetoast progressives who aren't really going to change the system and who aren't going to challenge anybody once they get elected. But on paper and on Twitter and the way that they look and the way they dress and the way that they talk will be a little bit more populist. That's what I think. And I think that's why Fetterman has a good chance to win. But Dr. Oz definitely didn't do himself any favors, man. Holy shit. He's a cartoon character. He can't even pretend to know how it feels to be not super well off, not super wealthy. So it's embarrassing. So last thing here, guys, this will be my second to last YouTube episode. I'm going to make one more for the end of PFC Season 2, going over the winners and the losers in the next couple of days. I will still continue to do the book club, but I've moved all of my political content to Rockfin and Rumble, and I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break here. I need to recharge my batteries, and the other reason is, guys, is that if you pay as much attention to politics as I do, eventually you need to take a step back. One of the things that's been happening to me lately, which is brand fucking new, is super annoying, is panic attacks. I had not had any panic attacks in like 20 years, not since elementary school, and then when I started paying attention to politics every single day and getting on that hell site Twitter every single day to talk about politics, I have a resurgence of panic attacks nowadays. And I don't know if you guys have any of those, but they suck. It feels like you're having a heart attack, literally. And the first one that I had about a year ago when I was really getting into the politics hardcore was like, it was right after I got the COVID-19 vaccination, and I was like, I'm having a heart attack from the COVID shot. I thought I was gonna die, but nope. As it turns out, just panic attacks. So I got to get that shit under control, and the best way I can do that is by backing off on politics, because all I see is we're escalating with China. We're trying to start nuclear war. The police are beating the shit out of people. Julian Assange is about to be extradited to the United States, which effectively means that, you know, freedom of the press is dead in this country. And, you know, there's school shootings every other day, mass shootings every day. It's just constant stress, and nothing is going right. And nothing is getting built back better. Nothing is getting built back better. The other reason is, too, guys, is that I have to change the format of the show a little bit, because since the beginning of this show, I have always tried to attack the squad who I helped get elected, to try to push them to use their leverage doing Tea Party tactics to actually get something out of Joe Biden. And once the House loses its majority, once the Democrats lose their majority in the House, the squad will they no longer have any leverage, which means they're going to be insufferable to watch for the next 2 years because they'll be able to have their scapegoat in the Senate. They'll say, we're doing all this progressive stuff in the House, we're trying our best, or excuse me, the House, and then they'll just blame House Republicans for blocking everything that they do. It's a convenient scapegoat. They weren't trying to do anything when they actually had power to do it. They didn't vote as a bloc at all for the first 2 years. So I am not going to be talking about electoral politics at all the second 2 years of Biden's presidency when I come back for seasons 3 and 4. It makes no sense to do so because going after them, they have no power anymore. So that means I'm probably going to go after TYT and the boutique left and the faux-gressives, the fraud squad, much less because there's no pragmatism in it. They won't have any power, so attacking them is just banging my head against a wall. So I'm going to focus more on other things like some theory. I'm going to do some things where I build some things out in my yard and show you guys some gardening tricks, helping you guys understand like the things that I already know about being self-sustaining and building community and helping people out. And we'll talk a little bit more about theory and read a lot more books in seasons 3 and 4. But it doesn't make sense for me to keep the same play going after the squad when they literally have no power the second 2 years. It's over. The fight that I was fighting for the last 2 years, we lost. We lost. They didn't get anything out of it. The best thing that we might get is some sort of executive order because Congress is gridlocked, and anything that goes through Congress is going to be hyper right-wing for the next 2 years. So the best thing we can hope for is that we pressure Joe Biden, which I will continue to do because he still does have power, but you won't see me talking much about the squad or paying attention to what's going on in Congress after these first 2 seasons because it's going to be gridlocked, and it's, why talk about it? Let's talk about actual solutions outside of electoral politics. So I will be stepping back. I'm going to do one more episode, and I'll continue to do the book club on the channel. But most of my stuff is going to Rockfin and Rumble whenever I come back, which could be... I can't imagine I'll stay out much past November because I want to, the midterms will come through and I'll want to be back involved. But at this point, I got to step back for a while for mental health purposes and to rewrite the show in a way that will actually, I think, help. It'll help some people. And I want you guys to keep fighting that good fight out there. There are some good things happening. The Dutch farmers are still striking and doing their thing, to try to prevent them from being phased out and become corporatized and to get, the wages that they need. Starbucks continues to unionize in the U.S., which is, again, a drop in the bucket. We need much more than that, but it is a good sign. The Ottawa trucker convoy a couple of months back at the beginning of the year was, again, making me hopeful, and I think there are some good things going on outside of the U.S. as far as revolution, and even as far as left-wing or progressive presidents being elected in the global South. So there are some things to hang our hats on, but unfortunately, I think things are going to get much worse in this country before they get better. The Republicans are poised to clean house in the House, literally, and they might even take the Senate. We'll just have to see how things shake out. And the Democrats are absolutely to blame for that because they didn't do anything to stop them from doing that. If they had just forgiven student loans, legalized marijuana, both of those are executive orders. That would be enough, I think, to win the midterms, but they didn't. Joe Biden didn't do that. They didn't codify Roe v. Wade. They haven't done any meaningful taxation of the wealthy to curb inflation. They haven't done anything to help with gun violence in this country, like giving people free mental health care or common sense gun reform. It's just nothing. We've gone to hell in a handbasket, and we're continuing to go down through the 9 circles of hell right now in a handbasket in this country. And it's very, very depressing, but keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not, as Lorax says in my daughter's show. So that has to be you. Go out there, raise your voice. Let's go fight, and I'll see you out there. Talk to you later.